Well, he was talking about we've known each other since we were in junior high and high school. A long, long, long time. I always thought whenever I was Tarleton's age, I thought that you were not really old until you were about 60 or so. And I had a very big birthday last weekend, and I'm about 60 now. and I don't feel that old. I don't think that that's old yet, except for the fact that over the weekend I was thinking about, my age and kind of where I fit into things, and I think I am now part of a country and western song. You know the old one that says, "I'll love you forever and ever, as long as old men sit and talk about the weather, as long as old women sit and talk about old men." I'm 60 years old, and all I do is talk about weather. So I think I have arrived. I'm an old guy. Tarleton, as he said, has come to work for us, and he's doing a lot of things. He's spending a lot of time with pasture, rangeland, and forage. And also let me, with full disclosure, say I'd love for you to talk to he or I, either one. But I will let you know this is a federal crop insurance plan, and so anyone who sells federal crop insurance can talk to you about this and sell this. So I don't want you to think for a minute that I'm saying that we're the only ones that can do this, or that's something that only we have access to. So whoever you trust and whoever you have a relationship with in the federal crop insurance business, I would highly recommend that you spend some time, if you don't already have a pasture, rangeland, and forage policy, spend some time with that person, because it started in 2006. I wrote some of those first policies. We have increased our policy number every year. It's not perfect. There are some things about it that just inherently, because the weather is the weather, that it will not ever be exactly perfect, but it has been very, very good all across our state. I think our company, out of our office, we write policies, PRF policies in probably 8 or 9 states. And every once in a while, I wouldn't call it a glitch. Every once in a while, it's not exactly perfect, but it is designed, the USDA has designed this policy to not be a jump in and jump out and try to predict the weather. This policy is really designed to say, if you get in and have a reasonable approach that fits with what your operation is like, if you get in and stay in it over a 3 to 5, certainly a 10-year period, USDA wrote this policy with the intent of their subsidy that goes into it, it will eventually come to you, unless we just go through a spell where it's just wet. But if we go through times that are about average and about normal, and then with some volatility one direction or another, their intent was, and my experience with producers has also been, if you get in and stay in, you're gonna have a really good return back on the amount of premium dollars that you put in. I'm not guaranteeing that. I want to tell you right up front, there are going to be some people this year who will write a check for premium, and there are some people real close by, that are real close to those same people, who have already had their premium paid by the money that's coming back from the policy, and will get some checks. So before we launch into this, I want to address that just for a second, because everything about this policy is based on and is written on a big database set that started back in 1948 that the U.S. government has through NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency. I always have to stop and think about that, and I don't know why. But they have data that goes back all over the country. There are over 9,000 rain and weather stations scattered across the country. They're adding more all the time, but that's where we are right now. In addition to that, they use a lot of satellite imagery and Doppler imagery, and there's a mathematical equation that they take to take all those pieces of information, run that formula, and then it kind of evens things out. I couldn't do it even if I could remember it. But I go back to my personal experience, having written these policies since 2006. Every once in a while, someone will have, the results will come out in the grid where they are, and they'll feel like it was maybe a little drier than that number said. About the same number of times, a number will come out on an interval, and they'll think, well, that says I was pretty dry, but I actually got a little bit more than that. But in the long run, what I have found is in a wet year, it shows to be wet. In a dry year, it shows to be dry. Is every interval perfect? Absolutely not. Is every interval usually pretty good? Almost always.
How far apart are the weather stations? How far apart are the weather stations?
Janet, I'll put a map up here in a minute, but it's intentionally backed off so far that you just see a lot of because there is not an exact. In fact, can you find that for me? It's concentrated more in some areas than others. In some areas, they're pretty far apart.
Right.
And then the formula goes, they take the 4 that are nearest to you,
Right.
and there's some kind of a weighted average they do. Then they take Doppler stuff. So that's kind of, and that's not exact, but that's a really good estimation of where those dots are. I have never actually visited one myself.
No, I just wondered.
There are some around. In fact, there's been a time or two, there's been some shenanigans. Somebody went and put a bucket over one of the rain collectors one time, and it was a really great payout for the deal, but they discovered what was going on. The thing that I think about on how accurate these things are is, like we're all used to a rain gauge. Got a rain gauge out at my house. I've had one at the farm forever. Had them in different places. But no matter how you collect moisture, this is a statistical sample. If you put a little rain gauge or a bucket or whatever and put it out there, and a rain comes through, you know exactly what it was right there where it was collected. If you move 200 yards away, there's going to be a little variance on that. If you move 2 miles away, there certainly will be. And so you put your buckets around and collect them. You take those statistical samples, and you get a very good representation of what the rain was like. Do you get it perfect? No. Do you get it pretty good? Almost always.
How much do they extrapolate from the radar compared to the actual readings?
I don't know the exact amount, but I do know that a lot of it, they have a general thing that they start out with, and they look at it, and then they go back, especially go back and look at those, where it was actually collected,
Right.
as a check, and they say, does this make sense? Did it sound right? Does it feel right? And in fact, one time, somewhere in our area, not right around here, but in our region, there was a big discrepancy or a big question. And they went back, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with a company called PivoTrack. But PivoTrack, all over the panhandle of Texas, they have rain gathering, electronic rain gathering data from farmers all over the place. And I was kind of surprised that they did this, but they went in and took hundreds of samples from PivoTrack, not as the number, but as a check. And they said, okay, does that make sense? But, in this 12 mile by 12 mile grid, does this make sense? And they said, well, here this looks like a big discrepancy. We're going to look at that. And so, everything that USDA has done and their intention on this is, row crop farmers have had subsidies forever and ever and ever, since my granddad was a farmer. And it's just been until recently, there was really not much of any kind of a USDA subsidy and help for livestock growers. I think they scratched their head for a long time thinking, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to make an insurance policy that really, that we can subsidize, or not an insurance policy, just a subsidy for ranchers. Do you subsidize number of head? Do you subsidize hay? Do you subsidize grass? They couldn't figure out how to do it where there was a big enough data set that you could actually do something that made sense. This is kind of one of the first things they tried, and it doesn't fix everything, but it's pretty good, because it said no matter what kind of livestock operation you have, whether it's dry land or irrigated or grass or hay, alfalfa, whatever kind of forage that you're growing, if you have adequate rainfall and what's normal and what you can plan on, you are in better shape than if you have less than average, less than normal rainfall. And so it's helped, and it's helped a lot. And it's come, We've delivered checks to people that's like, oh gosh, this doesn't fix everything, but it saves this. And this helps me go bridge this gap and get to the next thing. I tell people all the time, if you buy a policy, for me or anybody else, I hope you don't get paid on it. Because if you've got enough rain for a whole 12 months that you're above average everywhere, you're going to make a lot more money on good grass, good hay, than you will on good insurance. But if you don't have good rain on your grass and your hay, I'd love for you to have some good protection. It's better if you don't need it. If you have fire insurance on your house, I hope you don't collect on that. But if your house does burn, I sure hope that you're protected. And so that's kind of how we approach it. I wouldn't for an instant try to sell you on any idea that this is going to fix every problem that you might ever have in the livestock business. But I mean, just being here today underscores the fact that you're already living, you're already seeing this every day. You got a lot to worry about. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of places that we can tip this sideways and you can get in some trouble. Not going to fix all of them with this, but I'd love to plug one hole that makes it to where if we continue on with this drought, if we continue on with less than average rainfall numbers, you're at least going to have somebody come in and help with that a little bit. One other clarification, and then I promise we're going to get to this. This is not drought insurance. And I know that this conference is about drought and drought planning and drought protection. This doesn't pay you if there's a drought. What this policy does is for any 2-month interval, they divide the year up into 2 months, and we'll look at that just a little closer in just a second. But at any interval where you have coverage, if the rainfall in that 2-month interval is less than the expected average and your deductible, if it's less than that, if you get dry, then you get a payment. If it's normal or above, you don't. It's that simple. It doesn't matter if you're on the drought index. It doesn't matter what your production is. You may make a great hay crop and still get paid on this because the only peril that this insures is a deviation from average rainfall. That's it. Nothing else. So, having said that, let's look at a couple of things. Let's go on to the next slide. And I promise I'm going to let Tarleton talk here in a minute. But I've been wanting to say stuff. So, and we talked about this a little bit. And going to the next one, this is kind of where, an estimation of where the rainfall sites are, the weather collection.
For Hansford County, Northern Roberts County, and Occoquan County, they triangulate between Harris Airport, Groover Airport, and Pampa Airport. They'll even have 4 stations.
Well, and I know that they're a little sparse here. Go to the next slide though, and I want to talk about where a lot of our data comes from is Doppler. And there's some misunderstanding about this, certainly on my part. Whenever you watch the weather on whatever station you watch, and you see when they're showing the Doppler thing and there's this green stuff everywhere, and what I'm about to say is what I think I understand. I know all these words. I am not a meteorologist, so forgive me if I misspeak on some of this, but this is what I believe I know. When you see that and there's green and it's covering this big area and you look outside and there's really not even a cloud, but you're under the green and that is moisture that's from the cloud level up. It's just moisture that's out in the atmosphere. Whenever it starts turning those colors, that's when there's moisture from the cloud level going down. And so there's measurable precipitation that comes out. They filter that to where that green part doesn't show up. Anything that's just atmospheric moisture, just stuff in the air, has nothing to do with any of this. This only measures things that are moisture that's falling out of the clouds. So they take that from the few stations that we have, they take that Doppler information, they put that over there, they do some checks, and it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be right, exactly. But it's representative enough that it has been very, very good, really good. Okay, and so now let's talk about where you can buy the coverage. And let me just mention, a lot of you have heard of NAP and have probably had NAP and understand it, and I am not a hater on NAP. In fact, I kind of think you probably ought to have it too, and you can have both. What NAP does, though, is it is a county-wide program, and if the drought conditions are to where you're at 50% of normal rainfall or below, in that drought tolerance area, for the whole county, then your county is eligible for you to make a claim. If you're in a county that's eligible, and then you take your records, your production records, and your actual production of your grass and hay is less than 50% or less, then you can make a claim on that. And that works really well if it's just a horrible, horrible year. 2011, there were some big NAP payments. Another year or two, there were some big NAP payments. Usually, for the whole county to be in a terrible drought and you also to have a measurable drought that you can provide documents for, that's not going to happen as often. But it doesn't hardly cost anything. It's like, what, $300 or $400 now? I don't even know.
It's like $350.
It's cheap. It's a pretty cheap, absolute wipeout disaster kind of thing to have. I would encourage you to have it. But then to contrast that, instead of the whole county, this is set up on it's about 12 and a half miles, about 12 and a half miles. It's really a quarter of a degree of latitude by a quarter of a degree of longitude, and that's the grid system that covers all of the United States. And so anywhere you are, we'll put down a marker exactly where your acres are, pull those up, build a map, and that'll identify the grid that falls in. And so then if everything that you have lies within one grid, then you can buy coverage in that grid. If you have several acres and it goes across multiple grids, then you can kind of pick and choose and we can customize something for you. This is something I love about this policy, is it's not a one-size-fits all. You can get different coverage levels. You can work with the grids and there's a few rules you have to live within, but we can really make it something that fits you and your risk tolerance and how you want to be in the program. You want to talk about some coverage levels and base values?
Sure. Well, I mean,
Pick up your mic.
can you hear me?
I'll keep going for a second while you work on that. So USD or the FSA has a county-based policy. Are you good?
Yes. Yeah.
Or a county-based value. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we have this county-based value, which is all established through the FSA, and that helps us have a base of what where our pricing is going to be at. But we have two types of coverage, which you can see here is your hay and your grass. I've got some customers that do both, some that just do hay. They're both really great products, but I want to go back to when Gordon was talking earlier about, your risk. I know y'all heard my dad tell this story a jillion times by now. But in 2011, we went through a drought, and I was you guys' age. I was at Glenn College. I was playing football, and my goal was to play football at A&M, and then get an animal science degree, and come back home to Stanford, Texas, and run cattle on the Fork of the Brazos with my dad. And that all got wiped out because of that drought. And Dad's always said, he goes, if we would have known about this insurance, and he might have known a little bit about it. I didn't know anything. I was a 19-year-old kid, didn't know anything. And my mind was off somewhere else, but I knew I wanted to come back home and ranch with my dad. And when all that went down, he after everything had gone on, looking back, Dad always says, man, if we would have had that insurance, we probably could have survived this thing. So I think this is a very, very, very important risk management thing to use in your operation, because it's about your future, and it's an investment, and it's not a get rich quick deal. It's going to be one of those things that you know, you can pass on to your son and daughter, or and their kids and things like that. It's going to help them keep the ranch. What's the saying that Donald Brown is? Keep the ranch in the family, and the family in the ranch. And this is one of those products that we can supply to help do those kinds of things. So, but yes, we have two types of coverage. That's our hay and pasture coverage. Gives you a lower pasture coverage, gives you a lower value for few, because of fewer inputs and less management. So I mean, it's just a great product to have. So these are our coverage levels, and our trigger level, as we like to say. A lot of this part of the world, we like to tell our potential clients that we want to run at an 85% coverage level. And what this is anything that, if it rains 85% of normal, you will not get paid, correct, Gordon?
That's correct.
And if it's above that, you won't get paid. But if it's anything below that, you will get paid a certain amount of dollar, and how much coverage we have in that interval to help mitigate your risk. You want to explain?
Let me talk about the production factor just a second. That is a number that's assigned to a county by FSA. It's an FSA number, and they say in Hemphill County, an acre of grass for a year has a value of, I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to say $40. And so then you can take that base number, that's fixed, that's set. Can't change that. But then they said, you know, since it's not one size fits all, that base county value, you can insure 60% of that up to 150% of it. And part of the thing that's really great about that too is if you have in one grid that maybe it's got a lot of breaks, the grass is not great, and you say, well, you know, I don't really want to spend as much money on coverage there because it's not as valuable to me in my operation. So maybe you go off of that production, off of 100% a little bit. And then you've got some other stuff that's kind of maybe in a little, you know, a little valley or clearing where it's really, really great grass. It's some of the stuff that you really count on. And you say, well, that's more than that $40 base value an acre to me. And so they'll let you do up to 150% of that.
All in the same grid?
No, not in the same grid. Yeah, and so, and that's why whoever you are working with, whoever you trust, go through a lot of different scenarios and look at what the rules are, and you can build it that way. But that's a perfect question. That's a great one. So then when you get that done, then the formula works exactly the same. It's still the same way it measures rainfall, the same way a loss kicks in. The only thing is you determine how much money you're going to put in the pot by that production factor. Get your deductible on the trigger level and how much money is in the pot that you're going to draw from on the production factor.
One of the things is it shows you that you have your evens and odd years. Jan, Feb, well, I guess it should be your odds and even years, excuse me. So your Jan, Feb would be your odd years. But in our system, we have our stuff we use, it calculates where it thinks it should put you in the best intervals that are going to pay the best at the times that you need it. And a lot of other companies, and we can do this too, run off evens and odds months. But one thing is, if you did a Jan Feb, you could not insure a Feb March. You couldn't double dip in February. So you have to spread that out to like a March April. And you can do up to 6 of them. Sometimes I've got customers that only have four intervals that are going to pay the best, because the rest of them just don't pay out as well. But the whole gist of it is we want to spread this all the way out. I know some guys that do 50-50 and try to play that game and all that. It just, most of the time, it's not going to work. And you might hit that one time, and it might pay out like a slot machine. But what we're here to do is to help spread that out all through these 6 different intervals, and help you, have some money to buy all those input costs with your feed. I mean, we've been talking about it all day with the cost of cubes and hay going up. I mean, it's crazy. So this is a program to help you pay for those different things to help survive a drought.
Let me mention just one more thing about what he said. When your advisor sits down with you and there's two intervals that you just love and make sense, and you say, I do want to just put all my money on that, you can do that. That's fine. And if it makes sense to you, and if you've made a rational decision about why you want to do that and that's how you want to manage risk, good for you. More power to you. We have found over the years, if you take a lesson from insurance companies, they make a lot of money, insurance companies all over the world, by spreading their risk out over time and area. Time and space. Spread it out. And so in a situation like that, you may not make as much as if you hit exactly right and pick your two, but it usually shows that it would pay more often and keep you in the game. One thing that he did mention that I want to stress a little bit too is you can do evens, you can do odds, you can pick what you want. Our company has invested a lot of money, and some others have as well, to build a software program that says, okay, over the last how many ever years, and we can go all the way back to 1948, we can look at the last 30 years, 20 years. What I really like to do is look at the last 10 or 15 years, because some of you guys, you've been around a while, and so I'm sure you probably would agree with me that weather patterns are not the same right now as they were 30 years ago. It is different, and that's not political. I don't have a political statement to make. I'm just saying, if I'm looking at what is the probability of me putting my coverage in the best areas possible, in the best intervals possible, instead of me going back 50 years and looking at a 50-year model, I want to look at what it would have done best at in the last 10 years, maybe the last 15 years. And then in addition to that, I have a better chance of kind of remembering what happened in some of the last 10 years, and that makes my confidence in that decision better. And so we'll go through those things with you. We'll whatever you want to look at, you should ask to look at that, and an advisor will let you see it. You can look at evens, you can look at odds, you can look at our analytical thing on it, and then you can start playing with it and moving it to where, based on that, then plus if you really want to have more coverage in that March, April, May area, move some things around. One last thing on this, and then we'll move on. Silveus Insurance Company has a relationship with Brian Bledsoe, and he'll probably talk about this some today, but he goes back and he's analyzing this coming year right now. And he says everything about the weather patterns that are leading up to 2023 and what's been going on in 2022. And he's going to say, okay, now I'm going to go back and look over the last 20 years. How many years looked similar to where we are right now? And maybe there's 5 years or 6 years that he'll come up with and say, well, this looked a lot like 2011 or 2007 or whatever. He pulls those out and he'll say, okay, now we're going to analyze just those years. Take some of the big averages out and just say, in years that kind of start like this one is leading into this, where would it be good to put your coverage? And so there's a button we have that will do that analysis for you. It's kind of interesting, but it always needs to go back to, it is never just the computer spits something out and you do it. It's never like going to Vegas and rolling dice. It's never that. It is always an insurance policy that helps you manage your risk for variability in average rainfall. And so we have some tools to help you make some decisions, but when it comes down to it, it's got to be you making good decisions on how to manage that risk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's affordable, it's flexible, and it's really simple. So, I mean, that pretty well sums up this insurance. I feel like, I mean, it's
I'm good.
Super, super simple. We would love to sit and talk with you sometime and look at some things. Do you want me to show them?
Would you like to see, kind of up to this point in the year, a couple of different illustrations right around here? Would you like to see how it's performed so far? Because I'll tell you, not everything in this county has performed the same.
Well, you wanna show them? Looks different than,
Let me make this suggestion. We're running behind already, and I don't like to keep you past when it's supposed to be. Kind of in the central and northern part, there are some grids that have not made enough or have not had enough loss yet to actually pay the premiums. In southern and the central and kind of going south, several have. I thought it was really interesting whenever they were showing that what was it, the grass cast from Nebraska, because there's a little green spot right there that's kind of that I thought I needed to see that, because that really is showing up in the amount of claims and things that we're sending out. It's like that's one more thing that tells me the sample is at least.
What grade is this?
So this is, Janet, this is a grid. This is one of my customers, just south of here, right on the Hemphill Wheeler County line. As you can see, his total premium was $4,200 this year. And of course, we were dry in January, February. We've pretty well been dry for a whole year now. It all turned off Labor Day last year. And, sorry, it's kind of hard to see. I don't have a very good.
It's
I
grid.
can't zoom in on it.
Grid 18719 is the
Yeah.
grid number.
So what we did is through our system that we can look at, we spread his risk all the way out throughout the year. And so we put 20% of his coverage in January and February. Well, it rained 14% of normal, and he got paid a $7,000 or $7,100 check, which paid off his premium. There's his total loss, and then that's the check we wrote him. And so, that's pretty awesome when you can do those kinds of things. And then he still had all of this left over. Well, we got down here to April, May, and we had 20, I can't read that, it looks like 28%, 26 to 28% of his coverage in April and May. Well, we started getting a little bit of rain right around then for that area. And so it was 95% of normal. Well, he didn't get any money off that. Well, then he's got a little coverage in June and July. We happened to get quite a bit of rain. It was 118% above normal, and we didn't put a whole lot of coverage right there. But now we're in August and September. He's in this interval, and it's 67% of normal. So he's still got a chance to make something. But I really hope we get a lot of rain here. From now until the end of this month, or through all the way through December, because we need it. It's
So his 20% paid his premium just in January, February?
just
That's
in
correct.
January and February.
That's
Yep.
correct.
And
And then he still has 20% left in November, December.
Right,
so we could have stacked them way up right here. We could have put 35%.
Well, he got more money.
And he would have got more money,
Right.
but then he wouldn't have had as much coverage down here on the back end of things. And what happened a lot around this part of the world last year is that we got a lot of moisture early on in the year. Well, a lot of my customers had to pay a premium come this time last year, and they weren't too happy about it. Nobody's ever happy about writing a check. But what happened was it turned off in September last year. And then they got everything that they owed on their premium and money back. So it really helped going into the new year.
Is it, I forget, and I should know, is it January to December?
Yes, January. Yeah, it's the full calendar year, but the bill does not get sent out until September 1st,
Right,
and it's not due until October 1st.
right.
And
But it's
and then
not-
after that,
you
there's
still have part of the year left.
and then you still have part of the year
Part of
left.
the
Yeah,
year
well,
left, yeah.
usually, you can. Yes.
So
So y'all, is that how we get the 6 months that it covers? The
The 6 intervals,
600.
We chose that.
2-month intervals,
Right, mine's got certain months. And
Right.
I was wondering how it came up to that, so my insurance guys pick those months as the ones to get, or is it electronic?
some agent or some producer has to make a choice.
Okay.
Somebody
I-
picks it.
I was wondering, cause I didn't remember making a choice, I think he did it for me.
It's
Well,
possible.
He picked good, cause it's been paying like slot machine.
There you go. There you go.
But again, I'm gonna tell you something though too, don't count on that happening every year because,
No,
I mean, this is just like having life insurance or whatever, car insurance or whatever, I mean, you're not gonna have a wreck every single day.
I
So-
do with the premium what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Feed the cows, I go buy the feed, when the check comes in, I go buy the feed.
You're doing it right.
Yeah,
You're doing it
that's-
right.
That's the way you're supposed to do it. But this is just an example for this area right here. You know, I do have some producers that probably, like Gordon said, will owe a premium. I mean, it was like that Nebraska, chart showed. I mean, it's really green right here in this southeast corner, or northeast corner of the Texas Panhandle. Y'all must be living right up here, I don't know, but.
I don't think that's it.
Cause it's awful dry, I mean, we're in a lot better shape, in the Panhandle, I think, in general, compared to a lot of other places in Texas. I've got a customer, south of Abilene, and they hadn't had any rain, hardly at all, and it's really sad to see, but again, that's why we have this insurance, so.
For the sake of time, let's do this. I appreciate your attention, and you've been great. I would really recommend that you find somebody that you trust and get more information about it and figure out if it's really for you or not. If you'd like more information, we'd love to help you. But there's plenty of other options, but I think you should talk to someone. So
I really appreciate Gordon's thoughtfulness. He told me before we had this presentation, he said, Andy, yes, we're here for Silveus, that's my company, but he said, I'm here more for education. So Roger, I want to point you out. Roger, would you raise your hand up? Roger's been in our grass grazing school. Roger, is it Hansford County Insurance that you own?
Hansford Agency.
Yes. And so Roger represents this product as well. Is there anybody else here in the room? You do, Austin?
Yes, sir.
And so there's others that do this, and there's a lot of good companies. And so I just appreciate Gordon and Tarleton, Jared, and these guys for sponsoring and helping it. Let it be an educational information. These guys have got great tools, and so be sure and see them. One of these guys, or what Gordon likes to say, and I really appreciate your choice of words, who you're comfortable with as an advisor. So, Joe, one question, quick.
Yes, I don't sell it, but I've had it for 10 years, and my salesman gave me a 10-year report, a 2-to-1 return on my investment for 10 years.
So I'm gonna tell you this because I've seen it a lot for our county because in 2020, when we couldn't have meetings because of COVID, I helped producers look at it here in this county, people that had never seen it before. And it pays in Hemphill County, and every county's different because of the averages since 1948 that the National Weather Service collects. But in Hemphill County, it produces about $3 for every one over the last 10 or 15 years average. That's a pretty good return. So, guys, these guys are going to be around. Let's give them a nice round of applause.